Hello, I'm Zachary Vaca, and today I'll be talking to you about the philosophical term asceticism. Based off the research I've done on the podcast, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and through the readings of St. Augustine's The Confessions. The speech will be divided into roughly two parts. First, what is asceticism, and how does asceticism apply to our class, what we've already learned, and Boethius and St. Augustine's ideas of true happiness. So first, what is asceticism? Well, as discussed by the podcast, asceticism is the revoking of worldly goods in exchange for spiritual goods, such as virtue and patience, faith. So basically, this could be as little as living on a smaller wage, living in a smaller house, living in more meager means, to as large as what Antisthenes did, where he sealed himself inside of a tomb and was only offered scraps of bread every few days. Usually, though, this was more of a middle ground where ascetic communities were built, those who wanted to become more virtuous and live more meager lifestyles. And these were all male communities, and females weren't allowed to join the communities, but they're allowed to sponsor the communities. They could give away some of their money or some of their husband's money, some of the family money, and keep these communities thriving. And these communities did thrive. They existed all the way until today, although they did evolve away from ascetic communities into monasteries. Now, these are basically the same thing, except monasteries are a lot more Christian. So during the Greek times, there was the idea of virtue, and this is going into true happiness. So virtue is what is defined as a good person, and it is largely based off of culture. So virtue to the Greeks, to the ancient Greeks, was if you were virtuous, you did good things. So you had to be virtuous in the first place. So only virtuous people could do good things, whereas non-virtuous people would do bad things. Now when the Christians came along, they had the idea of original sin. So we were corrupted from the very beginning, and we had to overcome that. So through the idea of virtue, it had to change. There was nobody who was virtuous from the very beginning, except for maybe Jesus. So virtue became the idea of rejecting temptation. And this is all coming from Peering's writings in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Antisthenes really worked to change virtue, and by the time it got to St. Augustine in his book, The Confessions, it had molded itself into you were constantly being tempted. In book 2, chapter 2 of The Confessions, he talks about love and how he was constantly being tempted by passionate love. And he took a sort of ascetic approach to love, and he said that only moderate love was the proper way to do things. Fall too deep into passion, or fall too deep into cynicism and fall away from love, and you wouldn't be virtuous anymore. You would either be cold-hearted, or you would become lustful. So asceticism, in his eyes, was a nice middle ground. So true happiness in the Christian views of asceticism is detaching yourself from worldly goods and becoming virtuous through the throwing away of desire and throwing away of temptation. So in conclusion, asceticism is the revoking of worldly goods in order to attain spiritual goods, and it evolved from virtue being somebody who is born virtuous to somebody who becomes virtuous by denying desire in themselves. Thank you very much.